Samsung's Odyssey series truly lives up to its name. I mean, there are so many gaming monitors out there now. Now, of course, that also means that the flashier models often get all the spotlight here at YouTube, while the more subtle monitors kind of get left behind in the dust, or as I like to call them, unsung heroes. One such example is the Odyssey G5 32 flat screen variant, which is exactly why we're going to give this underrated product the fair review it deserves and answer the question of whether or not this is the right flat screen monitor for your gaming needs. So let's get into it. Make no mistake, this very much looks like an Odyssey series monitor. I mean, you do have those assertive edges at the bottom with the 2-depth layer to give it that really gaming kind of vibe overall. The black color really suits this monitor. Other than that, you'll notice you do have a matte finish screen at the front, and it's a large monitor. After all, 32-inch might seem like a small size, but it's really not. Now, what I love about the Odyssey monitors is that Samsung puts a lot of detail at the back side of the monitor. It's not an afterthought, so you'll immediately notice you have a design or texture going on here. You of course also have that iconic blue halo or Odyssey ring as they call it on the backside, which really adds a lot of attention and detail to this monitor overall. And then of course you have the stand itself. Now, while I'm not the biggest fan of those overextended feet, they take a lot of desk space and they don't look very pretty. They look like overgrown toenails if I'm being honest. However, I do appreciate the stand itself. After all, it has full swivel motion, top down, left, right, and of course it's fully height adjustable as well with a full 90-degree tilt function as well. Connectivity wise, keep in mind this is ultimately a gaming monitor, so you don't necessarily have a lot of port diversity, which means you get one DC port of course to power on the monitor and the charger is included. You also have a DisplayPort version 1.2, a HDMI 2.0 port, and you also have a mostly useless USB-A service only port, meaning it can only be used for firmware updates, not for normal functionality, and then of course a headphone jack to reroute audio. Now keep these ports in mind as they do have, how do I put it, certain implications which I'll talk about later down the review. Okay, so let's talk about the cool stuff, the display specifications. You have a 32-inch IPS panel here with great viewing angles. Additionally, you have a native Quad HD resolution, a snappy 1 millisecond response rate, a maximum refresh rate of 165 Hz. Additionally, you have a max sustained peak brightness of 350 nits, but you also have HDR10 certification, so that number can get higher. And also it's worth noting that you do have a anti-glare coating on the display in itself to further reduce any sort of glare. From a gaming perspective, this display does a fantastic job given that it is a lower mid-range gaming monitor. Thanks to a snappy refresh and response rate, we get some really quick intuitive frames. That also means of course the fact that when you're playing first-person shooter games in a competitive environment, you will be able to enjoy the game as you get fluid, smooth motion, and of course Samsung does a great job at having various software engines work behind the scenes to further optimize this. It's also worth noting, thanks to having built-in AMD FreeSync as well as NVIDIA G-Sync compatibility, you can utilize that no matter which side of the fence you're on. And of course, generally speaking, the HDR10 certification also means that compatible games really get an additional boost of both brightness and overall vividness that really creates some beautiful scenery when you use it with the right games. Generally speaking, guys, I think this is a beautiful monitor, and a 32-inch screen combined with the Quad HD resolution means you don't have to worry about a pixelated view. You have plenty of pixels to provide a ample and clear resolution at that level. Now, while everything sounds pretty good up till now, there is one nasty secret with this monitor that really breaks my heart, and that is to achieve 165 Hz, you have to meet certain conditions. So keeping in mind you have a DisplayPort version 1.2 here, you just barely have enough bandwidth to hit 165. Unfortunately, that means you have to disable HDR or you can't hit 165 at all. And if you're playing on HDMI, forget it entirely. You just can't have 165 Hz unless you deliberately disable the audio transmission, and even then you still can't have HDR enabled on either connectivity option. So basically, to use everything this monitor has to offer, you have to keep the refresh rate at 144 Hz, which allows you to have audio video transmission plus HDR enabled. Otherwise, you get the refresh rate with certain dramatic compromises. While this is still technically a 165 Hz monitor, Samsung advertising that as a signature feature is a dirty move. They could have avoided all this by just including getting one simple DisplayPort version 1.4 and all our problems would be over, but they cheaped out, they shot the consumer in the foot, and basically what you have here is a 144Hz monitor that's capable of going a little bit above and beyond under the right circumstances. Now, to be perfectly fair, this doesn't make this a deal breaker. A lot of people don't care about HDR altogether, and you might not even care about hitting 165 and might just be happy with 144. And in that capacity, it's a great monitor. But again, this is one of those cases where a company borderline misrepresents the capabilities or functions of a given product, and that's kind of what happened here. On a more cheery note, you have a 99% sRGB rating, which means this monitor produces some great colors that are fantastic for both content consumption, like watching videos on YouTube, for example, or of course just enjoying the colors a game has to offer. And you could technically also use it for amateur level photo or video editing, though ultimately it is a gaming monitor and it won't be able to compete with a proper productivity monitor, of course. To access the onboard menu, you actually have a single button at the bottom of the monitor. I know a lot of you aren't fans of a single button, but this is omnidirectional and it's really well implemented. So when you enable the menu, you'll actually see everything is really well categorized. It's not too hard to find any given setting, and in a glance, you can even see all these settings that are enabled, like the refresh rate and everything else. So it is pretty useful, all things considered. The Odyssey G5 32 normally has a retail price of $400 US, though it frequently goes on sale throughout the year. In fact, there's a 1 in 2 chance, if you were to check the links I have in the description below, it might already be discounted right now. With that said, the Odyssey G5 has a lot to offer, so whether it's the Quad HD resolution, the ample screen size, the fast response rate, and snappy refresh rate, or perhaps the fact that you have HDR built in, all those things are amazing, and plus having both the G-Sync and AMD Premium FreeSync are just a chef's kiss. However, the biggest flaw with this monitor is the fact that you don't get DisplayPort version 1.4, and as a result of that, to access 165Hz, you have to make certain compromises that I think Samsung partially mislabels when they advertise this monitor. Nonetheless, despite those shortcomings, this is still a fantastic monitor. Samsung's reliability with their IPS panels is always top notch, and you get some amazing visual representation for gaming. And if you are not looking to spend like $1,000, then this is a great mid-range option that often gets looked apart because, well, Samsung themselves don't particularly advertise the flat screen variant, and if you have migraines or headaches like I do, then I prefer flat screen versus a curved version, but there is also a curved variant of this exact same monitor in case you're interested in that. Let me know what you think of the Odyssey G5 32-inch screen. If you're interested in getting one, again, there are links in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next one.